Hello, dear friends. We are so glad you're here to learn about the reality of dissociative identity disorder. Welcome to Season 3. We are your hosts, Drew
and Garden System,
a couple of multiples.
We are a married couple, and we both have dissociative identity disorder. Did you know that 120 million people across the globe live with dissociative identity disorder and are often misdiagnosed for 6 to 12 years?
We hope to help educate and dispel myths about DID to help people find the right diagnosis and appropriate treatment as quickly as possible.
Please visit acoupleofmultiples.com and sign up for our mailing list to stay up to date with our podcast, our private paid online DID community called Hearts Multiplied, and to book consultations.
That's right. Drew and Garden System are now offering consultation to help educate and support those living with and treating dissociative identity disorder. You can book an appointment with either Garden System or both Drew and Garden System right from our website, acoupleofmultiples.com.
We hope you enjoy this episode and learn something new.
We appreciate all of our reviews, and we love to hear from you, dear listener, about what you enjoyed the most. We are honored to have multiple sponsors for Season 3. You can find links to each sponsor's webpage in the show notes of every episode and on our website under the Listen to Our Podcast tab. The Institute for Creative Mindfulness, one of the largest EMDR therapy training programs in North America, is directed by Dr. Jamie Plus-Marich, the only EMDR therapy trainer who is out as a plural and offers the full EMDR therapy basic training in a way that honors lived experience and destigmatizes dissociation in clinical work.
We felt so validated when we were able to authentically participate in this training as Garden System. Go to www.instituteforcreativemindfulness.com for a full list of upcoming trainings, both online and in person, offered by Dr. Jamie and her selected network of EMDR trainers.
Bearings therapy is different from anything you've ever tried. You spend your nights worrying about whether you did the right thing, whether you're failing your family, how you and your spouse don't connect anymore, and those things haunt you at night.
You don't feel comfortable talking to anyone. A, you don't want to relive it, and B, you're not interested in talking about your garbage. You may feel lost right now, but I'll be your compass. Get your bearings. Call me today, 214-892-2158. As a certified internal family systems licensed therapist, Tiffany Morgan, owner of Holistic Self-Healing Psychotherapy, specializes in working with dissociative identities through IFS and sculpting.
Known affectionately as Ocean, she brings lived experience with dissociative identities and anorexia, offering consulting, psychotherapy, training, and authoring a book on personal and professional experiences in these areas.
Visit www.tiffanycobb with 2 B's, Morgan.com. www.tiffanycobbmorgan.com or call 520-582-9313 for more information.
Welcome, dear listeners, to another spectacular season of A Couple of Multiples.
The reality of dissociative identity disorder.
Season 3. We know you missed us.
And we missed all of yous.
Kind of points to the fact that over the past 2 seasons, we have built a relationship with all of you, dear listeners.
And it got us thinking about this relationship topic. It seems to be a subject that comes up a lot when talking about dissociative identity disorder.
So guess what Season 3 is going to be all about?
Relationships.
So here we are, your host, Drew.
And Garden System, a couple of multiples.
Ready to bare our souls about this very important topic.
The first thing that comes to mind when talking about relationships is attachment.
Inquisitive minds might be wondering, what does dissociative identity disorder have to do with attachment?
Everything, at least in our opinion anyway. Attachment is a very necessary experience for survival. Attachment experiences can affect the development of DID. See, when we are first born, there is an innate desire to attach to our caregivers. We know that being loved as an infant is just as important to our survival as is food, shelter, and hygiene.
Well, and I think as a baby, being loved often means we are being cared for too. I mean, food, shelter, and hygiene all come from caregivers as well when you're that young. So being loved and getting your needs met all come hand in hand.
Yes, it does, and it should. Yet, it doesn't always happen. For example, think of the difference between a mother who holds her infant during feeding while singing and talking and making eye contact with the baby versus the mother who puts her baby in a swing and props up a bottle and then walks away.
So true. It's the interaction, connection, and communication that happens between caregiver and baby that builds that attachment. A lack of interaction, communication, and connection, neglect, leads to issues with attachment. Basically, spending time interacting with your child is just as important as feeding, bathing, and providing shelter for them because connection provides the basis for a secure attachment.
When there is a disruption with attachment, the child will fail to develop this secure attachment. Dear listeners, you may have already heard of the 4 attachment styles before: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. Often these styles are talked about in the context of one's romantic relationship, and they also are created through interactions with caregivers as we grow up.
And honestly, as a teacher of young children, I observe these different attachment styles and environments that create them firsthand. All people develop one or more of these attachment styles, regardless of whether or not they develop a dissociative disorder.
Right. How one develops DID is discussed throughout season 1 of our podcast. What we're talking about today is how attachment affects one's relationships when they have DID. See, attachment styles are not permanent. One can shift from having an anxious attachment to a secure attachment. And being a multiple means having multiple attachment styles and multiple shifts in those attachment styles.
When I was growing up, there was a lot of inconsistency with the interactions I had with my mom. Although my mom hasn't ever been officially diagnosed, I do believe my mom is a multiple as well, because of the consistent inconsistencies I experienced in her caregiving and parenting as a child. My mom and her sisters had what one would deem as a very abusive environment growing up, which I believe led to my mom's dissociative identities. Sometimes my mom would wake me up in the morning, have breakfast ready, and a loving note in my lunch. And other times I'd be waking her up, got told that good daughters made their mom's beds, and I'd put together whatever I could find in the fridge for my lunch. It seemed I never knew what I was going to get as far as her behavior went at any given moment, and my ability to detect her possible switches and my self-taught skill to de-escalate her anger at times meant whether or not I was going to be safe or not. It didn't help that she often blamed her behavior on me. She would say, "If you would just do this, then I wouldn't have to do this." I came to learn that I was the cause of the abuse I experienced, and I developed a good dose of hatred for myself at a very young age. And in the process of experiencing so much inconsistency from my mom, I developed a disorganized attachment style and also a dismissive avoidant attachment style because of the inconsistency, terror, and fear I experienced growing up instead of a sense of security.
Let's take a quick minute and give a brief overview of each attachment style.
Good idea, Garden System.
One of the attachment styles you just mentioned is dismissive avoidant. It's when one dismisses or avoids developing an attachment. There may be an avoidance of intimacy and connection. There may not be connected to their own emotions, let alone attempting to connect with someone else. Neglected children who learn to take care of themselves from a young age may develop a dismissive avoidant attachment style because they missed learning to make those connections growing up. Yet, you also mentioned having disorganized attachment, and we will define that momentarily. How does dismissive avoidant attachment show up in your system, and what caused you to develop it?
Well, I think my mom putting blame on me as a young child for her behavior instead of being aware of my needs and emotions and being accountable for her own moods and behavior is how I developed dismissive avoidant attachment. I was often rejected and criticized. I became more of a thinker than a feeler because my feelings were ignored and I was told I was wrong and a bad daughter. I realized I couldn't rely on my mom to consistently meet my emotional needs, so I learned to withdraw and switch off my emotions. Developing a dismissive avoidant attachment style shows up in several of my others in my system, but not all of the parts of myself. I, Lizzie, the adult part of me that spends a lot of time out in the body, now along with several others since several of us are very blendy these days, can be dismissive and avoidant when it comes to our behavior. If I'm not careful, I can be avoidant and distant in the relationships that are most important to me. Poor garden system. Because sometimes we forget we are safe now, and others we have chosen to be close to do care about our emotions, feelings, and experiences, and are much more consistent in their behaviors. Well, most of the time anyway. As you all know, wifey here is also a multiple, so sometimes inconsistency is the consistency because there's not just one of us doing all the things. At least we know each other's others quite well, and that makes things more predictable. But yes, sometimes I avoid being close out of that old fear that I will be hurt.
And as you all know, opposites attract, even with multiples. Can you all guess my attachment style? Yep, that's right. I'm the anxious attachment style. You know, where you strive for extra closeness and connection.
Hold up there. Oh, so this is every dismissive avoidant attachment's dream catch. Just come closer, wifey, and I'll push you away. You end up feeling rejected and abandoned, and I feel like a villain yet again. Sigh. The struggle is real.
It really is. Anxious attachment may come with a high fear of abandonment, which results in the constant need for reassurance. This attachment style is very much wrapped up in all of my littles. In my childhood, I wasn't necessarily overly criticized, but rather just ignored. I think my mom had a lot of difficulty regulating her own emotions and also seemed to struggle with sensory issues. She was, and still is, extremely easily overstimulated, and I was a lot to keep up with. I shared in a previous episode how my parents had bred golden retrievers that gave birth to 11 puppies at the same time I had been born. And several of those puppies had to be bottle fed just because there were so many. I was also bottle fed as a baby, but my mom would give my older brother the choice of bottle feeding a puppy or bottle feeding me. He always chose me because I was a lot easier to feed than a puppy. So my mom and I actually missed out on that important bonding connection that happens when a mother holds and feeds her child. I never really bonded with my mom as an infant. Now, my brother is actually pretty awesome, but an 8-year-old boy is not capable of providing the same thing that my mother would have provided had it been her instead of him.
So you think you developed anxious attachment because your brother bottle fed you instead of your mother? Or was there obviously more to it than that?
Oh, there is definitely more to it than that, although I think it paints a picture of the dynamics in our household. My very first word was my brother's name. I would call for him from my crib. I never called for my mother. My mother's presence was rather irrelevant for me when it came to whether or not I felt safe. My brother's presence, however, was everything. I had no fear. I'd jump in the deep end of a swimming pool and sink to the bottom and never once worried that I didn't know how to swim because my brother would save me. Then he grew up and joined the Marine Corps, and he was gone. And that happened right about the same time that my best friend's older sister was killed in a car accident. My best friend was like a second family. I was probably more attached to her mom than my own mom, and in many ways her older sister was like my older sister too. And of course, there's the trauma that no one knew was happening. I had a rather anxious attachment with my mom's older sister. Whenever it came time for her to leave after a visit, we would pitch an enormous tantrum. I can remember standing at the end of the driveway with my hands outstretched, reaching for her car as she drove away, and just screaming at the top of my lungs. There's a strong suspicion that perhaps that behavior was an emotional and body flashback to trauma. When my aunt left, it meant I got hurt. Those were very early childhood memories from before I was 6 years old, so the memories are really hazy. I will probably never know for sure of the who, what, where, and when of all of my trauma, which also drives some of my anxiety. It's more like I know that I need to keep my safe person close by me at all times.
This makes complete sense. An anxious attachment that mainly shows up in the littles in your system. I definitely see and feel this being in a relationship with all of yous. How about your adult parts?
We also have cells that do the dismissive avoidant thing as well. Maisie is most definitely our dismissive avoidant attachment. Wouldn't you agree, wifey? Oh, if only you all could see Drew's face.
Yeah, she does the Wednesday Addams thing quite well. No emotion or expression, and will glare at you like your days are numbered. I like her a lot considering I am dismissive avoidant myself. No need to reassure her of all my affections.
Well, she does need that reassurance, but won't respond in the same way our anxious attached selves would.
Yeah, she likes being told how beautiful she is. Only time I get a sly smile out of her.
Aww. Well, okay, we've talked about both dismissive avoidant and anxious attachment. The other one you had mentioned was disorganized attachment. This is when you can't decide whether you want to be close or pull away. It's often described with a push-pull type of behavior. I need you close, so I will pull you in. But, you're too close. Now I have to push you away.
Yes. Disorganized attachment style is usually caused by inconsistent caregiving. For instance, a caregiver may comfort a child in one situation and then also cause a lot of fear in another situation. The child doesn't know what to expect. This is hard for a young person who needs to attach to the caregiver in order to survive, because sometimes their needs are being met, yet in some situations, due to the inconsistencies, the child experiences the opposite: neglect, abuse, or dangerous behavior by the caregiver, causing fear and for the child to have to retreat or push away to ensure their own safety, therefore not forming a secure bond.
And this is where one theory of dissociation comes in, that a split or divide happens here. There's the one part of the child that knows mom or dad or whatever caregiver, loves him or her, and attaches. Yet that part cannot know that said caregiver is also abusive. So there's another part of the child that forms that does not attach because it knows their caregiver is abusive. These two parts of self may not be aware of each other because, well, they cannot know about the other. The child cannot hold two truths at the same time, that their caregiver can be loving and caring, and sometimes can also be abusive.
For me, I believe that this is exactly what happened. The people that were caring for me were also abusive. I developed parts that knew they couldn't trust the adults in our life, and they held that knowledge and memories separately from my other parts that were then oblivious to this and only remember the caring behaviors of our caregivers and felt attached to people like my mom. This allowed me to go to school and mostly slip under the radar of people that could have helped me had I shown more distress than I had displayed in public. The parts that went to school simply did not hold this information. For me, the way I split as a system was purposeful, since some of my system was purposefully formed and programmed to go undetected by the adults in my life.
So, how does disorganized attachment show up for you and all of yourselves today?
All of my adult life, I have wanted to be in a committed, intimate relationship. Yet, when I'm in one, the difficulty arrives when the other person wants to connect and be close to me. Someone wanting to be close to me scares me, and I vacillate between wanting to distance myself and not connect to doing everything I can to be close and connected and fear abandonment. It's something I have had to work on hard to heal. It's definitely an ongoing process. I feel like more of my littles exhibit this disorganized behavior, whereas more of my adult selves exhibit dismissive avoidant behaviors.
Sometimes I think that our adult selves or older selves exhibit the more dismissive avoidant behaviors because they don't want to feel the hurt and pain from not having needs met. It's safer to pull away than to reach for connection. The littles still crave love and attention and will continue to try and reach out. We hear others talk about being on the receiving end of someone with disorganized attachment and behaviors, and it is exhausting for them sometimes to manage the swing of behaviors and emotions. I would like to add that it is exhausting to be the one with disorganized attachment behaviors as well, especially when you try so hard not to follow through with those impulses from the fears of pain and abandonment. Struggling with this great desire to push someone away and yet at the same time pull them in can also create even more dissociation for oneself.
I agree. It's confusing and exhausting. And when you're in a relationship with another multiple that is also going through all these things, it can be all the more confusing and exhausting. That's when I'm grateful for the natural love and connection wifey and I have for each other. I often joke that I didn't have a choice but to be with her because I really do feel like my heart chose her. We do get each other on a very deep personal level, which makes us that much more understanding of each other and our behaviors.
In many ways, being a multiple married to a multiple is helpful and better in so many areas. It's also sometimes that much harder too. It definitely requires that both of us have a lot of patience, understanding, compassion, and grace for each other in all the things. For the both of us, it definitely works out well. It's also propelled each of our personal healing journeys forward faster in many ways too.
Very true. Being in a worthwhile, loving relationship is very motivating to heal the underlying crap that lurks from unresolved trauma. What are some ways or things that have helped you heal these insecure attachment styles caused by childhood trauma?
We have been and still work on, because let's be honest, healing is an ongoing process. EMDR, with a lot of negative beliefs and memories that are associated with those beliefs. We do a lot of journal writing, art activities, and have attempted some somatic interventions as well, although we find the somatic ones the most difficult to attempt. When we enter into relationships with other people, we inevitably trigger emotional and physical flashbacks to the past and often end up transferring old things onto our partners. It uncovers wounds that need to be healed. There are many ways to heal these, and for us, EMDR has been the most effective. It also requires a great deal of internal communication amongst all of ourselves as well. What has been helpful for you?
Reprocessing memories and beliefs so we no longer have the same emotional responses have been key to beginning to heal these attachment wounds. Having different parts of myself reprocess their specific memories has been important for us. because it allows us to live our current life with more complete awareness of our reality when we are younger, and more of our thoughts and behaviors make sense. Also, developing regular open communication with you, Garden System, has been helpful in us connecting on a deeper level as partners in a love relationship.
Viewing some of our attachment responses as emotional flashbacks has helped with remembering to bring all of ourselves back to the present as a way to help every one of us. Reminding ourselves that our partner loves us and that it is now and not then has been extremely helpful. It's easy to fall into the groove of old thinking and view our current relationships in the same light as how past relationships have been. So it is being that much more aware of the idea of now versus then and helping heal wounds. And as my therapist likes to remind me, triggers are an opportunity to heal. When something brings up emotional pain in my current relationship interactions, I can look to the past for the source of my negative belief and work on healing that old trauma. Then my way of thinking starts to change in the present. It's a lot of hard work, and it is worth it.
I agree. The hard work is totally worth it. The reminding ourselves that it is now and not then anymore is super important. Our present doesn't have to be defined by our past, and I think we work every day to make that a reality. I think it's also a good practice to think of how we want our now to be so we can form a vision for our current life. Keeping in mind of how we would like things or how we wish to feel or think or behave is a good way, in my humble opinion, to strive towards your best life.
And this is the hope with all of these attachment styles. You're not stuck with any one particular attachment style. It is possible to develop secure attachments in the present, even if you've never experienced them in the past. And experiencing something secure is a very powerful experience. This really is the important work with the therapist, because often the therapeutic relationship is the first secure relationship someone with DID ever gets to experience.
So one might ask, how do you develop a secure attachment when you've spent years with an insecure attachment and or attachment wounds? For me, it has been finding people that can be consistent in their relationship with me. This does not need to be an intimate or romantic relationship. It can be the relationship with your therapist or with a trusted friend. The first secure attachment I experienced was with my trusted therapist. She was consistent, did what she said she was going to do, always followed through, and she showed consistency in her ability to be there for me when I needed her in an appropriate way with appropriate boundaries that she talked about with me from the start of our therapeutic relationship. There was no surprise or guessing. I knew what to expect, and it has been so refreshing. I have learned that it is possible to trust somebody, that people can be trustworthy, and that I also don't need to stay in a relationship where there isn't consistency or where it isn't wise to trust because there aren't appropriate boundaries. I have learned what to look for in relationships so I can develop secure attachments with others and feel a sense of safety with my chosen family I have created.
For us, learning how to repair a rupture was key to developing a secure relationship. There have been times when we felt hurt by something our therapist had said or done, and when we expressed that, we received an apology. We received an apology with 0 attempts of being defensive, 0 attempts at telling us we were being sensitive, 0 attempts at gaslighting us about what happened. We remember just staring as we heard the words, "I'm sorry I hurt you." And it occurred to us in that moment that no one had ever apologized to us before. It was a realization that relationships can have repairs. It was a realization that we can be heard and respected. It was a realization that I could voice what I had felt and that I would be accepted. It was a pretty powerful moment.
Hearing an apology from someone is powerful after never being apologized to. It is a validating experience and makes a person feel like what they feel matters and is valued, that they are not wrong for feeling whatever it is they're feeling. It also helps a person know that they will not lose a valuable relationship when they express that they have been hurt. It helps them know that they can receive the comfort and validation they deserve when they communicate their feelings.
The strange thing is, though, when you do feel and experience that sense of secureness, it's such a foreign feeling, and it feels a little weird. I remember reconnecting with someone very dear to me at the Healing Together conference, and the time came for us to say goodbye, and this person left. We had been anticipating that awful knot in our stomach that comes from a lot of our abandonment fears, but it wasn't there this time. I remember just feeling okay. There were no anxious thoughts. There were no fears. There was just a sense of peace. I remember just allowing myself to feel what I was feeling in that moment, as it was such an unknown feeling that I had in my stomach. There really are no words to describe this feeling, and I remember thinking, is this what safe feels like? Is this what security feels like? Wifey here was all ready to be there to support me in this moment, but I was like, really, I'm fine. I was completely secure in my relationship with this person, and I could hold it and feel it even without them in my presence.
These secure attachment stories are the best.
Oh, they really are. And we enjoy sharing them here so that all of you, dear listeners, can know that this is possible for you too. We have been through so much trauma that it is easy to fall into the rut of believing we are broken beyond repair within ourselves and with others. The truth is that we can have happy, secure relationships with other people and with ourselves. And we are just so excited to dedicate this season to relationships.
It's such an important subject. About a year ago, I had the sudden realization that I felt much more secure for the most part in my daily life after noticing that I stopped texting and emailing my therapist the way I used to. The truth is, the texts and emails slowly got less and less because I knew what her response would be. I knew exactly what she was going to tell me, and I was saying those things to myself automatically. Her comforting words made way for me to be able to self-regulate and feel secure knowing that she is indeed there, just a text or email away. But I was able to do and say all the same things she would if I were to contact her. It seems like it would have been a bit of a sad revelation that I really didn't need her like I used to. But honestly, it was extremely comforting knowing I had me and she was still there too. I had grown and formed a secure attachment that benefited my entire way of existing and being in the world, and I'm forever grateful.
It really is a beautiful thing. Just because you didn't feel like you needed to contact her as much didn't mean that she was any less a part of your life as your therapist. This feeling of security and safety really is difficult to describe, especially when you've never felt it before. But when you feel it, you know it. This knowing of, I am okay, and I've got this, is really empowering. It does take a long time to get to this place, though. The person I referred to earlier in my story of being okay once she left, well, it had taken a couple of years to get to that point. That connection started and lasted about 3 weeks, and she had such a profound impact on my system that our little Jenny was pretty desperate to not lose her, so to speak. When you're anxiously attached, it is like there is this gnawing hunger in the pit of your stomach that just needs constant reassurance. And this person very graciously gave that reassurance to Jenny over a 2-year period. There were a few shifts in our relationship during that time period as well. And when we last parted, that gnawing feeling within us just wasn't present. Instead, there was just so much peace inside. We still keep in touch with her, but it is different now. It is not because we feel like we need her in that anxious way as before. We don't feel the need because we know she's not going anywhere.
How can a therapist facilitate healing attachment wounds exactly? From my experience with my therapist, I think a lot of what my therapist did mirrors the work and research of developmental psychologist Mary Ainsworth and infant attachment. Mary Ainsworth talked about forming a secure base relationship. A caregiver provides the child with a sense of safety and stability, which allows the child to go off and explore their surroundings with confidence, competence, and resilience, because they know that they have a secure base to go back to. There are behaviors that go along with promoting the creation of a secure attachment, such as being responsive and promptly attending to needs, and also being reassuring and loving towards a child, person, or client. The response of the caregiver or therapist largely determines the formation of a secure attachment. My therapist reassured me and comforted me over and over again until I was able to basically hear her in my head when I was distressed and know what she was going to say even before I contacted her, to the point that I didn't need to contact her and felt secure knowing that she was still there even if I didn't contact her. I had developed feelings of safety and stability, and I had become confident, competent, and even more resilient than I was before because of the sense of security.
As a therapist myself now, I think a great question would be, how does a therapist provide this while maintaining appropriate therapeutic boundaries while also preventing their own burnout?
Oh, wow. Yes, extremely important. Which is why we have plans to not only do an entire episode on the therapeutic relationship, but we also have an interview episode with an experienced therapist and how they navigate attachment and boundaries with their own DID clients. We can't wait.
Yes, we have some awesome interviews for season 3 for multiple topics for multiple relationship types. And as always, we will be sharing our personal stories as well. We'll cover important topics such as ruptures and repairs, the therapeutic relationship, friends and family, and navigating intimacy.
To recap, in this episode, we started out by talking about attachment and how it is necessary for survival. A lack of interaction, not being responsive to a young person's needs, and not providing love and comfort for the child can lead to the formation of an insecure attachment. We talked about and gave personal examples of the 4 different attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. We also talked about how one can change and heal an insecure attachment. It doesn't have to be permanent. Both Garden System and I gave personal examples of how our therapists help us heal and form secure attachments. We also ended by talking about how a caregiver or therapist can help a person or child form a secure attachment by talking about the concept of having a secure base to help a person form a sense of stability and security.
In the next episode, we will dive into managing a long-term relationship when both partners have dissociative identity disorder. We will cover important topics such as communication, emotional regulation and co-regulation, and managing running the household along with daily life.
Until then, thank you for hanging out with
A
Couple of Multiples. We are honored to have multiple sponsors for Season 3. You can find links to each sponsor's webpage in the show notes of every episode and on our website under the Listen to Our Podcast tab. The Institute for Creative Mindfulness, one of the largest EMDR therapy training programs in North America, is directed by Dr. Jamie Plus Marich, the only EMDR therapy trainer who is out as a plural and offers the full EMDR therapy basic training in a way that honors lived experience and destigmatizes dissociation in clinical work.
We felt so validated when we were able to authentically participate in this training as Garden System. Go to www.instituteforcreativemindfulness.com for a full list of upcoming trainings, both online and in person, offered by Dr. Jamie and her selected network of EMDR trainers. Dr. Wendy Aporta with Bearings Therapy is a marriage and family therapist specializing in military and first responder individuals, families, and couples. She is proficient with clients experiencing PTSD, CPTSD, and dissociative disorders.
For her, helping those with traumatic experiences is not just a job, it is a vocation. She is experienced in multiple modalities and utilizes whatever is best for her clients' needs. She stays abreast of the latest research and treatments to provide the best possible outcomes for her clients. Call Bearings Therapy today, 214-892-2158. From your hosts, Drew
And Garden System.
Thank you for listening to A Couple of Multiples, the reality of dissociative identity disorder. This podcast is intended for educational purposes and is not a replacement for therapy.
Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapeutic relationship with the hosts or any guest speakers.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review. We would love to hear what you enjoyed the most.
You can visit our website at acoupleofmultiples.com for additional information, including how to join our new online paid community called Hearts Multiplied, to book a consultation session, to access additional resources, and to also subscribe to our mailing list to receive future updates.
Remember, every system is unique, and your experiences may be different from ours, and that's okay. You matter and are loved for being all of yous.